Hello, um, welcome. I'm going to talk today about Ethel Turner's Seven Little Australians, published in 1894, because I'm really interested in 19th and early 20th century Australian children's literature. So, hello. Right, obviously, Seven Little Australians is one of the most popular of all Australian children's books. In 1994, it was the only Australian book that had been continuously in print for a century. There's the Ethel Turner Prize. It's been turned into radio shows, stage plays, television series. It's got an ongoing appeal. Like there was a theatrical performance of it at my local community centre just last month. I'm going to give you a really quick summary of the plot, and then I'm going to talk mostly about something that most readers of the text are unaware of because it was cut for over 100 years. So, okay, what happens? There's a family, the captain is the head of it, they're living in Sydney, and he has a very young second wife. They have 7 rapscallion children who embarrass him at a dinner party, and as a result he sends one of them, the sort of the ringleader, off to a girls' school, Judy. Judy's very lonely. She comes back, she runs away and comes back, but she gets sick on the way. When she returns, she has consumption. So she and all the other children are sent to their stepmother's parents' station in the middle of nowhere, where they have quite a lot of adventures in the bush, fun in the bush, and then Judy is tragically killed when a tree falls on her, and it's actually very, very moving. Very, very moving, and not overdone in the way that Victorian children's deaths usually are. So, what happened? Okay, sorry. So, that's the plot, but what I'm going to talk about is what was cut from the plot. Okay.
You'll be surprised to hear that there's a section of the book that was removed for basically 100 years. It was in the first edition, removed in the second edition, and not reinserted until the centenary edition in 1994. So from 1897 to 1994, there are about 2 pages missing, with no acknowledgement. The section that was admitted was an Aboriginal story, quite unusual. Okay, so towards the end of the book, the Walcott children are at Yarrapinny, where their grandparents live. And during their stay, they take a picnic with Mr. Gillett, who works at the station, and he tells them a story that he heard from Tetawonga, who's the Aboriginal stockman who lives at the station. And this, it's about a 2-page story, but was removed for about 100 years by the editors from the second edition onwards. The story talks about Tetawonga's ancestors, recounts how the kookaburra got his laugh. So it's one of those just so stories. I'm going to read it to you now and then talk about it a little bit at the end. All right, once upon a time, said Mr. Gillett, Judy sniffed at the old-fashioned beginning. When this young land was still younger and incomparably more beautiful, when Tetawonga's ancestors were brave and strong and happy as careless children, when their worst nightmare had never shown them so evil a time as the white man would bring their race, when... "Oh, get on," muttered Pip impatiently. "Well," said Mr. Gillett, "when, in short, an early golden age wrapped the land in sunshine, a young kookaburra and his mate spread their wings and headed off to the purple mountains beyond the gum trees. They rested at night, and for a time during each day fed on worms and lizards and bush mice and grubs, which were then the only food eaten by kookaburra. One day, as they flew across the Bilwi, which is a small stream, Miss Judy, they were much alarmed to see a great whipperoo, Tetawonga's name for a snake, Pip, lying on a log. Its head was erect, its mouth was wide open, its neck very much inflated, just above the monster's head. Spluttering and screaming wildly hovered a beautiful little bird the kookaburra at once recognised as a Jida, a little blue wren. The whipperoo seemed to be doing all he could to terrify the little creature, which was nearly exhausted from fear and excitement. Nearer and nearer it flew, gazing madly into the glittering eyes of the serpent, and at last, with one piercing cry, fell helplessly into its gaping jaws. The kookaburra was very much grieved to see so sad an end for the poor Jida, and flew away from the sight of the dreaded whipperoo. Later, however, they saw him gliding through the grass, doubtless homeward bent with his dainty supper. On the way was a log burning slowly, and the whipperoo, seeing it, lay down beside it, being drowsy, and slept the sleep of the unjust. In his dreams, he saw the Jida again hovering above him, and suddenly raised his head high in the air and opened his terrible jaws, and lo! Out fluttered the beautiful little bird, and quickly flew away, safe and sound. Good iron, said Bunty. Go on, it's better than Jonah and the whale. The kookaburras were so delighted at seeing the Jida's wonderful escape that they burst into a fit of loud laughter, the first time the bird was ever heard to laugh. Then the great red sun that Tetawonga and all the Kooris call Uroka sank down behind the orange flaming mountains, and the world grew grey. A tall young Koori who was coming that way saw the whipperoo, and with one blow from his strong nulla nulla, which is a club, being interpreted means a club, cut its head from its body. I'd have swung it round my head and cracked its back like Tetawonga does, said Pip. You sure he didn't, Mr. Gillett? Couldn't take an oath either way, said that gentleman, seeing as the Koori is by now gathered to his forefathers and therefore not available as a witness. To continue, the kookaburra slumbered all night in a tea tree nearby, and when the sun crept up, they woke up with a laugh on their beaks, I should say, Miss Judy, remembering the escape of the Jida from the merciless whipperoo. And ever since then, so strongly did the incident tickle their risible faculties, at sunrise and sunsets and occasionally in between whiles, these particular birds burst into cachinnations of laughter you're all familiar with, and whenever they see a serpent, they catch it with their strong beaks and they kill it, just as the Koori did.
What is the effect of this? Well, the first thing I'll note is that this little story is distanced. It's not told by Tetawonga. It's told. It's something Mr. Gillett tells them that Miss Tetawonga had told him, which was an ancient story of his people. And I think it's important that it's from the past. So Aboriginal Australians, they're kind of allowed to have a past, but I think in 1894 they weren't really perceived as having a future. I would note too that this is a real anomaly in the book. There's basically no other Aboriginal people in Seven Little Australians. It's set in suburban Sydney. When they go out to the station, there's a couple of Aboriginal stockmen, and Tetawonga is one of them, and then that's it. None of them ever speak. There's no mention of any of Australia's Indigenous history. So I looked through the book. I did a search for the word native because I thought, that might be the language that was used. No, there were just a few mentions of the nice smell of native trees. So basically, this is a version of Australian history which entirely cuts out Aboriginal people, except that we get this one very distanced story in the original text. Now, why was that cut? Claire Bradford, who wrote Reading Race, suggests that it was done deliberately because this was problematic, because it kind of undermines the message that Australia is a young, new nation, which is very important to Turner, and it complicates things by introducing the fact that there were people here before the white folk arrived. Brenda Nile, on the other hand, says she thinks that perhaps it was cut because it was 2 pages that could be very easily removed from the text without it affecting the flow of the story, and the second edition, which is when they cut it, they put in a lot of advertising because this first edition was so popular, so they could take out basically 2 pages of text without changing the plot and add 2 extra pages of advertising. And which it was, I don't know, but I find it fascinating. There's this little gem of Indigenous, hinted an Indigenous past, which we didn't even know was there in one of the best loved stories in Australian children's literature. Thanks.